everybody, and welcome to everyone's favorite new drinking game, Charles Wallace. No, I am just kidding. It is Steve the Lawn Gnome, and we are here for the newest episode of Versus, episode 8, as a matter of fact. I have to admit, I am quite surprised that this is a segment on my show that has been as successful as it is. But then at the same time, I'm not so surprised because I always manage to find amazing people to do this show with me. And like before, it has happened again. Today, we are going to be doing a book to film battle discussion of probably one of the most controversial films that has come out in 2018, based on one of the most beloved children's classics of all time. And that, of course, is A Wrinkle in Time. But before we get into the battles, we have to introduce the panelists. So we are going to start, as always, with the defender of the books.
Hi everyone, my name is Reggie. I'm from the channel Don't Stop Reading. I am defending the book, A Wrinkle in Time, and I'm really excited to be here. I don't know if I'm supposed to say anything else.
No, you are absolutely fine.
Okay,
and yes, you are absolutely right. It is a single book, but at the same time, we also have to remember that there are more books along with them. So to a certain extent, you are defending the franchise to a certain degree.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure whatsoever. And we, of course, always have the counter. We have the defender of A Wrinkle in Time, the film.
Well, hello there. I'm Cami. Okay, I won't wear the glasses the whole time. They're just fabulous. No, I'm Cami from Cami's Corner, and I will be defending A Wrinkle in Time, the movie, because I thought, although, yes, there was some variations from the book adaptation, the movie is brilliant.
And you know something I have to say, because just in case all of you who are watching, if some of you are new to this little show, this is not going to be like Sunday sit-downs where I do half of the talking. For me, in regards to Versus, it is keep my mouth shut and keep my ears open, because it's really about the panelists taking care of this show. But I will say, before we get into this little battle, I have to say that I was a little bit worried if this was even going to get off the ground, because these ladies do know my attitude towards this film. As a matter of fact, all of my subscribers know about my attitude towards this film. So I was really curious if this trip was even going to be necessary. But I will say this, Cami came to me and she brought the fire, and she said, no, there is value to be had here, and I am going to talk about this to all of the people who are watching this evening. So Cami, I am grateful that you feel this way, because it's only going to make this episode all the more fun and entertaining. So before we get into the actual battle, of course, we have to go with some proper introductions outside of introducing ourselves. And that is basically letting everybody know that also I have a film appreciator going up against a booktuber. And because of the fact that I started this trend a couple of episodes ago, while the books had a commanding lead against their film counterparts with 3-0, the movies have sort of creeped on back. And now
it's almost tied.
And now it is almost tied. You're absolutely right, Reggie. We are now seeing the books at 3 and the films at 2. So this is definitely a pivotal moment. So let's first discuss your first impressions of reading the book, of course, because obviously the three of us always know that we should never judge a book by its movie, and there's always a good chance that we have read that said book before we actually saw said film. So, of course, when it comes to the books, we have to start with the booktuber. So, Reggie, when did you first encounter this book, and what were your first overall impressions of A Wrinkle in Time?
Yeah, see, I read this book when I was a kid, or at least I was told I did, but I reread it before the movie came out, and I couldn't remember anything about it, other than that I loved it as a kid. And I'm not surprised that I did love it as a kid, because there's some really timeless moments and characters in this book, in my opinion, but I had no memory of it. So when I read it this year, it was like reading it for the first time. And I was just really drawn into a lot of the things that felt timeless to me. So I really did like it. I didn't love it though, and that's surprising. So I was really excited to go into the movie. I wasn't like in love with the book, but well, we'll talk about that later, but.
Obviously. And Cammie, how about yourself?
I thought I actually watched or read the book rather a little bit late in the game because I remember all of my friends reading it at about the 5th grade level, and I actually didn't pick it up until I was in the 7th grade. And for me, it was more of a science thing. I had a brilliant science teacher in middle school. Shout out to Mr. Rex Nelson, and he got me more interested in science. So therefore, I knew that there were science elements to this story. So that's actually why I picked it up. And I think for that reason, I appreciated the story more than if I had read it with the rest of my friends.
That's a really nice story. That's very nice. And I always appreciate people that do a shout out for their teachers, because teachers are very relevant and important people in our lives. They do shape our minds for the better. Me, I was also a little bit late to the game because of the fact that I knew the book existed, but I also, as a younger guy, was not really much of a reader. Like almost everybody on the planet and their cousin twice removed, it was really Harry Potter that got a lot of people into reading books. And fun fact, I actually read The Wind in the Door for a book report without even touching A Wrinkle in Time. So, and I knew that that was the sequel to A Wrinkle in Time. So how that happened, I have no idea, because that book really confused me. So I read A Wrinkle in Time finally when I heard about the film coming out, and I absolutely loved the book. I thought it was so innovative. I appreciated the originality and the overall zaniness of it. But then, of course, we talk about the film. This was a movie that I think a lot of people were really wanting. And obviously, we heard about the casting, we heard about the director, and Reggie, what were your first impressions when you heard that this movie was finally going to be a big budget spectacle, finally, after years of possible anticipation?
I was really, really excited going into this movie. I was super excited that it got who I thought was a very promising director, a really diverse and exciting cast. I was really excited about, and I'm still really excited about what this movie can do to young people and for young people today. I was just really excited that it was getting the chance I felt like it deserved. It's been a classic for so long, and so many people have loved it, and it's meant so much to so many people. I was really, really excited going into this movie.
Excellent. Cammie, how about yourself?
I think the same thing, you know, when you, as a book lover, and for me, I think I'm more of a collector than anything, and you see a classic childhood tale being talked about, being made into a movie. Of course, the immediate reaction is apprehension. Oh my God, are they going to do it right? But then you get excited because you really want to see that visionary. You want to see how they're going to bring it to life.
Absolutely true. I think that's what we all anticipate as pop culture fanatics. And I always tip my hats off to someone who has a Sneetches doll. That is pretty much amazing. Yeah, she has a Sneetches doll, everybody. That is something that I think most of us do not have.
Over there.
I'm a big Dr. Seuss fan myself. But anyway, so let's begin the battles here with round number 1. And we're going to be talking about the overall atmosphere of the book and, of course, comparing it to its film. So the book's been around for a couple of years now. As a matter of fact, it came out in, I believe, 1962. Maybe it was a decade early. I can't seem to remember. It was 62?
Nope, 1962.
Great. Just wanted to remember that. And obviously, like the film, it also was in its modern time. Mm-hmm. So my question to begin off is the concept of atmosphere based on the time that the book is in. Is that considered to be something that's advantageous or something that is not? So let's bring it, of course, to the books first, which took place in the 1960s.
Yeah, so this book technically, actually, while it's released in the 60s, is supposed to be like a void of time and place, which obviously is very like relevant to its time. If you read the book and didn't pick up on a lot of the things, there's a lot of mentions and parallels to the Cold War, because that was what was happening in the modern time, and that's a lot of what is being represented, and kind of the themes of this book tie into that. So a lot of the red imagery is related to that. But anyways, while the set itself is kind of like timeless, the time period it's written in is very important to the way the story is structured, and it was modern, like Steve said, it was modern for the audiences when the book was coming out. It was what people were interested in, and I think that's something like all new media should kind of like be of the time. So it makes sense to modernize an adaptation. I'm not upset about that, But I do think because of the Cold War tie-ins, it's kind of important to understand where the story is coming from and where it started and what it was trying to do originally.
I didn't see that. Yeah, very, very interesting to say. Yeah. And Cammie, what do you have to say in regards to the fact that this movie actually takes place in 2018 as opposed to 1962?
Well, again, when you have to look at it from the perspective of movie versus books, when you're reading the book, obviously, you know it's set in modern times, so your mind or your imagination immediately takes you to the 1960s. You kind of start to visualize the way that they're dressed, the descriptives that are given of the characters, the houses, and so forth. When you're watching a movie, you almost expect that it would be set in your modern times. So what I really appreciated, though, is when we get to the part in the movie where there's that CCI version and all the kids are bouncing the rubber balls, you get a very vivid sense of the 1960s. So I think for the director, she did a really good job of bringing the book and the movie meshing at that moment. And for me, that brought an immediate smile to my face. So, you know, I don't expect that a movie is going to nail the book on the head. I mean, you just expect that it's going to take the direction of modern times. So I didn't go in expecting to see the 60s. I very much hoped that it would be relevant, because in order for a movie to be successful, you have to be relevant to your audience.
That is true, but at the same time, doesn't the, or maybe not necessarily the I've officially messed up my words here. The overall movie-going public does a good portion of it like a good period piece. Do you think it would have worked if it was actually in the 1960s?
No. And the reason I say that is because you have to understand, when you see immediately the word Disney is associated with the film, you already know that there's a massive budget going behind that. Furthermore, as a moviegoer, and this isn't to say that this happens for everyone, because not everyone goes in with expectations of knowing who the director is, who the writers are. But for me, I like to go above and beyond. So knowing who the director was, Miss DuVernay is not your typical director. If you're going to hire her to do a piece, you know to expect something out of the box. You know that you're hiring her for her, vivid imagery. And I expected nothing less of that. With children, you have to engage them. And so again, Disney equals children. So parents are taking their children to see this movie. Although yes, laced in the audience, and we've talked about this many times, you're expecting the person who has read the classic story. They're going to be in the audience. But if they went to this film with the expectation of having the book brought to life the way they read it, then they already went in with high hopes that are going to get squashed. With children, you need to be magical and whimsical and have tons of color and action and engage. But you also have to stay relevant, again, to your current day audience. So you have to be able to speak to both the 60s generation as well as today's generation of kids. And we all know today's generation of kids are very now.
Wow, that is very, wow. Well, the actual joke that I was going to say was, you said that they went above and beyond, but if it was Disney, shouldn't it have been to infinity and beyond?
Oh, classic. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I just wanted to throw that out there. Okay, so now let's talk about the atmosphere of Meg's home life. Let's first go into how it was depicted in the book.
All right, so in the book, Meg's home life, she has this like sense of community and family with her family, but she also has this sense of disconnect because she feels very like kind of isolated, and mostly she feels isolated at school, but that comes into a play at all aspects of her life, even at home, and it affects her relationships, especially with her brothers, her twin brothers that aren't in the movie, and to be honest, don't have a huge role in this book. But I'd say her home life it's just this very like, it epitomizes to me Meg in general. It's this like balancing act of like, who am I, where am I, and what do I care about? And that's the thing she's trying to figure out throughout the course of this story. And she has she has close relationships with everyone, and she also has tensions with everyone, and she just feels like she's always blaming herself, not necessarily just for her dad leaving or disappearing, but she's blaming herself for like just little things, like why is Charles Wallace bullied and not loved? Well, it must be my fault. Why is this? And she's just very self-deprecating and unsure, and it goes into all of her relationships. I think she has a very supportive family and she loves them very much, but her home life also plays into who she is and her own personal struggles. And it does kind of have this like 60s time period style where it's very like loving and like what you'd imagine a family life would be like, but it also it twists that and breaks that, because you know you don't expect in this time as much for a missing parent and what her mom has to go through and deal with, and it's very much taking that story and like understanding it and in the way that people of the time period would understand it, but also breaking it apart and kind of crushing it down and being like, this is totally not what you expect. And I think for the time period it was pretty like groundbreaking in that aspect, to not have a very traditional home life or family life.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely put its spin on the typical nuclear family, especially considering the fact that there were a lot of families that actually had both parents. The fact that the concept of the single parent is definitely something that was not really mainstream at the time. That wasn't really something that showed up a little bit more until like the late 1960s, early 1970s. But anyway, Cami, your thoughts and how the film depicted Meg's home life.
Well, again, for me, visually, I thought it was very genius because, as Reggie just explained, when you're reading the book, it was groundbreaking for that time period. But today, it's very common to have a broken home. So to start a film off where the father is absent, people can relate to that. People can say, you know, regardless of the fact that we know that the father can potentially come back, you have that understanding off the bat for this family. So Meg is already, you know, she's beating herself up. She has a lot of issues with her image and comparing herself to others. And so you see that immediately, which thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of young girls across the world can relate to that. You know, just with the influence of social media and how prevalent it is to be perfect or have that, you know, feel of perfection. And then you have the diverse family. You have Charles Wallace, who, you know, of course, we'll talk about this later. I know that who is now adopted. So you have all of these elements of the family that there's so many pieces that people can just be like, I get that. And that's what you need to engage an audience to a movie with, is to be able to be relatable. So, you know, when I say I really feel like the director hit this on the head with this movie, is she gave the feel of the book. She didn't lose that family entity that Meg had, but in the same respect, she gave this film a lot of qualities that today's family dynamic can relate to.
That is true. I mean, to a certain degree, if I just thought about this the other day, actually just right now, this wasn't something that was not necessarily unfamiliar if you think about it, because we also, when the book was written, we had the Korean War. We also, before that, had World War II. So this wasn't necessarily something that was unfamiliar to the average American household. I mean, granted, in the 1950s was classified as one of the most golden ages of the American family, but we also have to take into account that there were a lot of kids that didn't have their fathers because they were off to war. So it's definitely something that, at least the way I see it, was still very much something that was familiar. But I do agree with what Cami said in regards to the modernizing for the modern American family. That's definitely something that has changed predominantly throughout the decades. So absolutely, I can definitely see where you're coming from in regards to that. So the next topic that I want to talk about is, and we'll break this up into two questions. Let's talk about the overall look and feel of Earth in this place, and then we'll go, or if you guys want, we can just avoid that and we can go right on into the planets. Entirely up to you.
We can do all of them in one go, I think.
Okay, well, I'm gonna focus on breaking it up a little bit. So let's talk about the overall feel and look of Meg's home on Earth. Like, how did it feel, and was it something that was relatable, etc.?
I felt like it was pretty like neutrally described. I think the author was trying to make this very much like this can be anywhere and anyone kind of story. So there's like aspects of the home you'll kind of connect with, and the world around her. She goes to school and it's a normal school. She has normal relationships with like people around her. It's very like the setting on Earth is very like traditional. You're trying to get into the story so you understand and connect with this world that's created, so that when it quickly becomes this world that you don't know and these planets you don't connect with, you still have this tie-in, because if you go straight to this like different thing, you're not going to feel as connected. It's going to be some like foreign fantasy story, and sometimes that works, and I think that wasn't necessarily the author's intention in this. She wanted that connection. So I think the Earth setting is very important to like kind of set the groundwork for connecting with the characters and the world and the story, and just like building it up.
Okay. Tammy?
Well, you know, again, going with the book comparison to the movie, there was a lot of, for me, pulling out those elements of the book and adding some modern touches to it. You know, you didn't really lose the feel of Meg's normalcy. She went, like, you know, Reggie said, to a normal school, a normal setting. She was going through a lot of emotions with her father not being you know, around, not knowing where he was. She wasn't really understanding the distance that her mom was creating, why she was confused or hurt. And then you had this relationship that she had with her younger brother and the need to ensure to be his protector. So for that, I mean, it didn't really, for me, change much from the book. It just brought it to life and gave it a modern feel.
Okay, but now let's talk about some things that will definitely change, because it's very difficult to envision things that are definitely out of the ordinary. So let's talk about the planet of Uriel.
All right, so Uriel is the peaceful planet with kind creatures, and it's a just kind of like calm, happy place, pretty chill. I think I didn't imagine it to be so bright like it is in the movies. I imagine it to be, I don't know, more like pastels and like just calm, and it felt like very like Bam elsewhere. And I don't know, I didn't envision it the same, but it's just this happy place and this chill place where this is where also you foresee I think you have a look at it from here. You can see kind of you can see this like I don't know, like this disconnect of what's there and what's beyond there, and it's kind of like this like gate that they're gonna have to get past.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily need to tell people to start talking. When someone talks, please, the other one just jump in.
Cool.
Okay, I didn't know if you were just gonna signal me because I was ready to go. No, this is actually
that feels way too formal. I need this to be a little bit more casual. So when one person is done with their conversation, please let's just keep the conversation going.
Cool. We can do that.
No problem.
Good.
Great.
That's all I needed to hear. Okay, no, actually, this is where Reggie and I disagree, because I know that she had made a point about saying that there was some things with Uriel that she did not agree with based on her interpretation of the book. And this is where we draw that line in the sand between reading a book and watching a movie, because my interpretation of how I visualize something when I'm reading it is going to be 1,000 times different when I go to see it in a theater. My vision is not going to be the director's vision. So I never go into a film with the expectation that what I had in here is what I'm going to see up there. I will be sorely disappointed. I mean, that's just the nature of these types of stories, especially with a fantasy story. You just can't. You can't compare imagination to film, no matter how big the budget is. But when I saw Uriel for the first time, I leapt out of my seat. I kid you not. I grabbed both of the side arms and I was like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. Oh my God. I got so excited. I really did. For me, it just jumped the whole film. And I was all about the colors. I was all about the imagery. And again, going back to engaging with children, I know that if I felt that way at my age, the kids around me with their parents were just as excited, like, oh, look at this and look at that. And then you know, as Reggie had stated, you do for the first time get that visual of the darkness and from the, you know, the outside. And no, you don't get a huge perspective of it, but it brings that realization of your reality, that no matter how much beauty surrounds you, you can always have the presence of darkness around you. You know, you always feel that it's just one step away.
Okay, I'm just going to let everybody know that there is some spam going on in the comments. I have no idea what the heck is going on, but just want to let everybody know that I am on top of this. So I apologize profusely. Someone's just trying to get their 15 minutes here. But anyway, let's put the shoe on the other foot here, and let's start with the film perspective. Let's start with the vision of Camazotz, Cammy.
Honestly, I have nothing bad to say about this film. So for me, the visuals just kept getting better. Honestly, every time we would open up, in my opinion, the way I saw this film is like another chapter. Every time we would embark on a new chapter in this film, I would just be more and more impressed. Honestly, I think that Disney did such a great job by choosing Ava DuVernay to direct this film, because her vision surpassed my own imagination. I mean, you know, it had been many years since I had read the book, and like Reggie, I also reread before I saw the movie. That's just a natural state for me. I will always do that before I go and embark on a film. And also, as an adult, you will take in a story from a different perspective at this day and age versus the first time I read it when I was, you know, 12. So I was, again, just blown away. I was not at all disappointed with her imagery for either of these worlds, these planets, and to take those leaps, to do the tessering with, you know, all of the characters. I just, you know, you felt your, as the book describes though, you know, you felt your chest kind of get compressed, and you know, you were kind of holding on as they would tether between these worlds, and you were just rooting the whole time for Meg. You know, just you knew, having read the book, that eventually she was going to you know, grow with the story. But every time she would take that leap for me, I just felt like she was growing with us on screen.
Wow. All right, Reggie.
I was again disappointed with Camzott's portrayal in the movie, but not in the same way I was with Uriel's. It's we spend a lot of time in Camzott's in the movie, but we spend a lot of description there in the book. There's a lot of different planets you visit in the books, but this is kind of like the build-up. This is where everything is, like, coming to the climax. This is where everything's happening. And we, get there much quicker in the movie, which makes sense. You have to make cuts. There's not time to show every little thing, but it felt very rushed for me. And then also when we get there, it's just not how I anticipated it. I didn't expect it to be this way. In the books, it's described kind of as this place that you can kind of see anyone at. The kids don't really expect it to be this big evil place. I mean, they know what it is and they do expect it to be bad, but like they see it and they're like, oh, well, this isn't what I expected. This isn't so bad. And I feel like you get that in the movie, but the disconnect is like much less grand, because there's not as many, like, I don't know how to describe it very well, I guess, but in the movie you get straight to the big, like, visual pleasers that you know are going to make good moments in the movie, and not necessarily the moments that like make the characters understand what's really deep-seatedly happening there. And you take a lot of the moments that really are terrifying in what the like control of it is doing there. So you see the planet and you get that there's this control aspect to it, but you don't really get to see how deep it goes. Wrinkle in there.
Okay. And now I think one of the final things that we will discuss in this round is the concept of, I know that I accidentally wrote time travel, but according to my wonderful wife, she said it is not time travel, it is tessering. So let's talk about tessering, aka wrinkling, because this is definitely something that is, I guess that's probably the craziest and most innovative part of the story, because it's definitely something that had not necessarily been seen in literature in that way. I mean, we had already had books like The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, but this was definitely something new. So let's discuss where it is in the book, and let's talk about how it's described, and we'll start with the book, of course.
Okay. So in the book, we describe tessering or time travel, or the getting of one place to another, with a visual description of a string. I wish I would have brought a string. That would have been smart, but I didn't. I have a charger. Let's do a charger. So you have an ant walking across the string. The visual is that the quickest way to get from point A to point B is, you'd imagine, the ant has to walk. That's the only way. What Meg's father and this book is trying to convince you of is that you can tesser by wrinkling this line and making point A and point B come closer together. And this is such a weird and hard concept to describe, especially to children, that in the book, they actually draw it out for you.
Yes, I remember that.
Visuals. And it's described as the ant walking across a straight line and taking the loop, and they just like, oh, that's it. That's how we travel. We do it. But they explain it with squares and different shapes and kind of just really get into it. And I can imagine for a kid, this could be like a boring part, but it's also so fascinating because this is not how time travel has ever been described before. And I don't think it's ever really time travel or ever been like discussed in this way again as like detailed, but like also like just assumed that you get it at the same time. It's a very interesting, like, she's just like, okay, here you go. It makes sense. We talked about it. It makes sense. And she just like assumes you get it. And that's pretty much it. And it's very clever and cute, and I like it.
Mm-hmm.
It works very well, though, because you have to understand that Madeleine L'Engle was studying quantum physics at the time she wrote this book.
Oh, damn. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Come on, Steve, get it together.
Hey, I'm just a book reader and a movie watcher. I don't know these things.
Well, you're usually good with all the back history, so I'm surprised you didn't know that. But she was in fact studying quantum physics. And I think for her, this was her way of describing it to children. Because, you know, although children learn on different levels and some are far excelling and some are far behind, you have to, in some cases, just find a very generalized way of describing certain things. And something as complex as quantum physics, I mean, to do something as beautiful and simplistic as a line with an ant on it and show the dimensions. And she does such a beautiful job in the book of going through the layers, you know, what a flat dimension is to the two-dimensional to the three-dimensional world. And then I love how Charles Wallace gets almost excited in the book when he goes into talking about the fourth and fifth dimensions, because that in essence is getting kids excited about science. Even though they may not have realized it reading the book, they are getting excited about science. And in the movie, you know, it's really hard to, you know, to kind of go through that motion because you do need a visual aspect. So for me, for the visual, the waves, you know, you have the kind of like, it was causing a little motion sickness, I'm sure, for some people, but you had, you know, this kind of like watery wave going on for the tessering, but you have to find a way to make it relatable to your audience. And tessering is, I mean, time travel in general, when we think about it, I know that for me, it was brought into great relevance with Stephen Hawking. And even when Stephen Hawking talks at his most level of id, I'm still like, huh? You know, because my mind just cannot grasp this. And I think that also was the beauty of this film, because one of the underlying themes of this book is Meg tries so desperately to understand everything and every little detail of everything around her. And as the audience, we too are curious, what's tessering and what does it do for us? But we're not supposed to understand everything. You know, some things are just because they are, you know, like you said it, Reggie, just it is what it is, and we accept it and we move on. And I think that for the human brain to fully function and for us to not just be immersed in, you know, books all day long, some things we just have to accept for what they are and accept a very generalized explanation.
Wow. I am just absolutely loving this conversation. We have gotten really philosophical here. I don't think that has ever happened before. And I am embracing this to one hell of an avail. But anyway, we have officially finished up the first round. It's done. And yeah, and it was close. Very close. Everybody ready?
I'm ready.
Books took round one.
Wow.
What?
I'm surprised.
Yeah,
What?
and
I'm
you wanna
so
know,
surprised.
I am surprised too, but I think it was just because of the fact that at the very end, I think it was because Cammy sort of like kept dealing and giving more credit to the book when it came to Tessering. So you got to be a little bit careful there. You got to remember, you must remember which side you are on.
Well, it's hard when you actually enjoy the book, and that for me
I
is the
mean,
hardest part. Is that
there's
I
gonna be
truly,
moments.
truly love this book.
I mean, there's
Yeah,
definitely gonna be
well-
moments where I have things that I did enjoy about the movie. So we'll get to my turn of this too.
No, absolutely. There will be turns. Everybody's going to get their turn. There's only 3 people in the room, and one of them is not allowed to have a turn. So anyway, I just wanted to say we're taking our first little breather here. Since we didn't get any questions, I do want to say hello to the people who are in the chat that I know. So Joanna from Joe the Great is there. Thank you so much for coming. April from April Sarah is here. And Stacy from Stacy's Stories just popped in. Stacy is someone who I've actually had the pleasure of meeting last summer, which was wonderful. And I'm hoping that she is doing very well. But I'm guessing that nobody really had any questions in regards to the first round. We are willing to answer questions. So if you guys want a question answered, unfortunately, you'll have to wait till the next round is over because we are starting the next round, and I think that things are going to heat up a little bit because we are now going to start really seeing the differences, like true differences between the two, because we're moving on to characters now. So the first character that we're going to be talking about is, of course, our main character, and that is Meg. And we're going to talk about her representation, her overall character in the book versus the film, but more importantly, when it comes to the film, the major change that happened in regards to how she is represented in the film.
Okay.
And Joe just actually asked a question, and I think the answer is going to come right now. So let's actually wrap it into the round itself. We'll start with the books. Let's talk about Meg.
Meg is well, we'll start with the obvious thing. Meg and most of the characters in this book are white, and I will be the first to tell you I'm so stoked that was a change that was made to the movie, and I'm so here for that representation. But we are going to talk about her characterization in terms of like characterization. I found Meg in the movie to be, how to put this gently, super whiny, super and yes, that's of her age. But I found her to just like always want to take the easy way out. And in my mind in the book, Meg was always this like strong, unique person who like, she felt very disconnected and disaffected by a lot of things, but she cared so much. And in the books, she's often like touted to be like, oh, you don't try in school, but you have so much promise, and you're smart, but you don't apply yourself, which is a thing a lot of, I think, people as young people can relate to, being told like that kind of thing, which is one of the reasons I think these characters have really stood the test of time. I found Meg in the movie to just not bring the things I loved most about her to the table. They were there, but then they settled like salt on top of something. They didn't really get into it. She was strong, she cared, but it wasn't like integral to her. I found that her like things, the things in the movie that they focused on were like her insecurities, and that plays a big role in the end of both the book and the movie and how she kind of grows. But I don't think they focused enough in the movie on her strengths.
Okay, so for Cammy, you're also going to have to throw in your thoughts on the young actress who played Meg. So you're going to have to throw in a little bit of your thoughts on Storm Reed.
Well, this takes me back to when I was talking about the family dynamic at the beginning of this session. It's important that we saw this because, again, we're being relatable to a 2018 audience versus a 1960s audience. Had this been a film in the 1960s, this filming, this direction, this cast would have never happened. So to see this I thought it was fine. Now, for me, I'll be honest, just like the absence of the twins, when I first realized that the cast was going to be diverse, I was like, and I kind of didn't really know where the director's vision was. But I entrusted in the fact that it was Ava DuVernay, and I know that from seeing her other work, you know what? I have confidence in her that she's going to do this okay. So to answer Joe's question and to touch on it, it doesn't make a difference to me what color, what background, what nationality a character has when they are doing a movie portrayal, as long as they understand the character. If you are a method actor and you have read the book or a script or whatever it needs to take to get you in the mindset of being that character, then I will give you the floor. I will give you the forum that you deserve because you've earned it. You've proven to me that you get that. And to me, I think she did a phenomenal job. I thought she encapsulated everything that I remember Meg being. And I disagree with you again, Reggie. I think Meg was very whiny in the book. It wasn't until Calvin started to give her her courage and make her realize, you do realize without your glasses, you're beautiful. You do realize that you have more inner strength than you realize. And all the characters do touch on that with Meg throughout the book to try to give her that boost of confidence. But she has so much inner insecurities because she's comparing herself to her mom in so many aspects. And in the movie, you don't see that as much. You see it as more just like a battle within her own mind and trying to compare herself to these other girls that she's going to school with. So again, with the relatability of today's society, that's what girls do. They're always comparing themselves to, other girls they see on social media, or they're simple classmates. So to me, she was whiny. She was confused. She was, she just didn't have that inner confidence. But you do watch her grow and you watch her mature by the end of the film, as you do in the book. So her representation, to me, she got it spot on.
Okay. The fire's definitely coming here. I'm like, wow, this is definitely going to be a good fight. So let's move on to our next character, Calvin.
Calvin is, okay, so we'll step it back a little bit for you. Calvin in the books is my favorite character. So unless he was perfectly portrayed, I was probably not going to be pleased. So we'll start off with that. Like, I am biased to that. But I also truly believe that Calvin was the most, besides characters who aren't in the books, the most changed, especially in terms of what he provides to the story. In the books, Calvin is this big catalyst for Meg to kind of see herself from a different perspective and to kind of grow. And he's just this like voice of reason in a way, but he's also his own character. He's not just this catalyst. He has his own family issues, and his family issues are very seated in that he loves his family and they don't necessarily provide the same amount of caring towards him that he provides to them. There's this moment in the book where Calvin is going to go off with Meg to do something, and he doesn't, I don't know if we know if it's the big thing is, but he calls his family and he's like, yo, I'm not going to be home. And they're like, whatever. And he's like, well, just leave the door open for me. And he says this moment to Meg, like, I didn't have to call. They probably wouldn't have even noticed if I didn't, but I cared and I want them to know where I am. And in the movies, he's just stripped of all this. He is a catalyst for Meg, but I don't even see him as much as that. He has his issues with his dad, but they're just feel like daddy issues that are quite contrived to me. They're very cliche and tropey, and they're not very deep. And there is a sense of like almost abuse going on, which is interesting and important, but it wasn't tackled. So I feel like it's hard to say like, oh, it's good that it's there, because they never really touch on it. And I also felt like it was kind of gross, in my opinion. In the movies, I felt like he was eye candy. They just kind of pan over him. And I'm like, he's a kid. He's a young kid, and it's kind of weird and creepy to me. I really disliked his characterization in the movie.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Cammy taking the floor right now, she's also going to have to rope in Levy Miller, who most people will consider one of the most underused and wrongfully used young actors in Hollywood today. I mean, if you've seen Pan, I'm sorry. So
I haven't, but
Yeah, do yourself a favor and don't. Please don't. Just go watch Hook again. You'll have a better time. But anyway, let's talk about Calvin in terms of the film.
Well, you know, again, touching on the vision of the movie, you have to, again, go back to your audience, because your audience is children. So for your children, you have to be relatable on multiple levels. So with Meg, we see that definition in her family dynamic. With Calvin, although it's more just like a father-daddy complex issue, if you will, I think it was important to just hone in on that in the movie, because you had to have a reason to relate to Calvin. You had to have, because in the book, he's very complex. You know, he's got multiple layers. You hear more about other members of his family. You kind of get the feeling that he isn't very wanted. But in the movie, in order to get that impact, I feel like we had to focus on just one person. And for most kids, they have that insatiable urge to please one parent, whether from like most girls, it's to please their mom. For some boys, it's to please their dad. I think that it was important to put that in the movie, because it shows that he was so engrossed in being perfect, or as close to perfect as he could for his dad, and no matter what he did, he always felt like he fell short. And then you get that anger moment when, you know, he does call his dad over the phone, and his dad gives almost those abusive type words back. And to me, that just, it said it even further, because as an audience, you start to hate the father, you know, and you need to do that to root for Calvin. You need to be able to have those feelings of hurt and disgust, like, you know, a relatable hurt and disgust. As a child, having, you know, your own father or own mother having maybe said that to you, it's like, I can understand what he's feeling right now without even having him utter a word. So with movies, it's much more of a visual aspect than it is with a book, where you can, again, kind of, you know, create this story in your head or these visualizations. So that dynamic of Calvin, I thought was important. Now the hunka, you know, I get that. That's weird because he is a kid, but we see this all too often again in our society. I mean, hello, Zac Efron, it started with him, where you had women in their 50s and 40s pining over this. I mean, when he did High School Musical, he was 15 or 16. So it's not uncommon. I mean, there wouldn't be this, you know, lioness prowl kind of thing in our society if it didn't exist. Is it disturbing? Yes. And you see it fought a lot more in realms of Twitter, where people will go to bat about sexualizing children, but it's happening so frequently in our society, and we are teetering on a very dangerous line with that. You have to find, for movies, attractive characters, though. I mean, it's the nature of the Hollywood beast. If you don't find someone that people will pine over or Google when they leave the theater, then you're not going to have people wanting more. In this particular case, though, I don't think we're going to see a sequel with it, but it will definitely open up the avenue for Levi to have other roles in the future. And the fact that he's easy on the eyes for people is a bonus.
I mean, for me, the issue isn't, though, that he's attractive or anything like that, and that's totally fine. For me, it's that the camera man slow pans over him, and he's very sexualized in a way that is not necessary at all. And that goes back to exactly what you're saying about Hollywood, and this is the deep-seated issue, and not just with Ava, and not just with this movie. But for me, that's the problem, is not what people are doing when they get home, but what the movie did. And what, like, the camera angles did.
Okay, so let's throw a curveball out here. Let's also talk about, especially, and I really want to hear this thought, because Reggie made some very good points, but Cammie, you made some great points too. Did I expect this whole Hollywood thing to come up? Absolutely not. But I want to know more about Calvin's relationship with Meg, especially with the role that he plays.
As far as the relationship that they shared?
Not necessarily the relationship, but more so how they worked off of one another.
For me, visually, on the movie aspect, I thought the chemistry was a bit awkward at first. I wasn't really jiving with it, but I think that in order for the story to come full circle, you have to be very familiar with the trilogy as a whole, because as we know, you know, to close out in a swiftly tilting planet, Meg and Calvin end up together. So there, I think, needed to be some awkward tension right off the the bat, and we needed to kind of just prepare ourselves because, you know, as Reggie had pointed out before, movies move a lot more swiftly than books, more quick, and you have to be able to keep up. So for me, I think watching that aspect at first, I felt kind of it was being forced on me, you know, the relationship dynamic. But I knew in my mind, knowing the trilogy, I had to accept it because they needed to have more of an attraction to each other. So it was awkward in the beginning, but I think by the end of the movie, it was a much more believable relationship.
Yeah, I have a very similar opinion. I felt it was like they didn't like jive as much, and in the books, they do eventually became a thing. But in this particular book, they're more like just super friendly. They're super young. They're just like learning about each other, and there's not much of a romantic pretense to it, and there's not much of that to it at all. But I mean, there's something to be said for people who have read the book and get these Easter eggs when they go to see the movie, and knowing that there is going to be this thing, and seeing that romance come like be something that these kids are having, and like it makes sense. It's fine that it's there. I just don't think the actors' chemistry really portrayed it very well. But there's nothing wrong with the writing of it or putting it in my opinion.
Yeah, just in
I
case
almost felt like Levi was hesitating a little bit in the film, you know?
Yeah, I can see
he
that.
just felt, I mean, from the get-go, I saw it was almost like he didn't know how to bring some of his lines to reality. You know, how do I make this visual? How do I say this the right way? And for me, that was awkward because I'm like, dude, get with it, get this together. You got to figure this out, because if you don't, you're going to be really hard for me to get through the rest of this film. So he picks up, but yeah, there was a lot of awkwardness with him.
Yeah, just in case anybody didn't realize, there are going to be spoilers in this video. And if we didn't have spoilers, we wouldn't have a conversation. So let's move on to Charles Wallace, shall we?
Yes, we shall.
Let's talk about a couple of specific things that I want to hit on, and that is the fact that he has gone from being an actual born into member of the family to an adopted child in the film. And also the young actor who plays him, Derek McCabe. I mean, obviously, I will let Cammie deal with that part when we get to her, but I really want to also understand your thoughts on how they brought his various personalities to the screen from the book, because I will definitely say that he was probably the most interesting character in the entire book based on my own perspective, and that is all I'm going to say about that. Reggie, hit it.
So I'll start off with saying that I think the Derek, what's his last name?
Derek McCabe.
Derek McCabe. I will go off and saying that I think he was the best child actor of the bunch, or at least the most interesting, in terms of he gets these two dynamic different points that he has to do very different things with, and I think he did what he was given very well. That being said, he's very different from the books, as you can be seeing. He's also a little bit older. He's already in school. These are changes that don't really affect much, and it's fine. But what does change is kind of who Charles Wallace identifies with, his awkwardness, and how other people see him. He's really quiet at home, doesn't really talk. I mean, he's really quiet and doesn't really talk, and people assume that's because he's stupid or dumb, and they make a lot of fun of him. He's get bullied a lot, and that none of that is touched on, which is fine because the movie is kind of making this Meg story and not all of their story, and the book is while focused on Meg, is a little bit more about all of them and makes everyone a little more fleshed out, which is just a thing that happens with books. But Charles Wallace is kind of like actually epically smart in the books, and he's like a step above, and you don't really, in my opinion, don't get that sense of him in the movie. He's much more like relatable and like smart kid, but he's not like this super human brain. And he just doesn't want to deal with people in the books, and he doesn't want to talk to them, and he just lets them kind of think what they will, because it's not worth the effort of kind of telling them they're wrong and trying to prove it to them. He's just like, well, I care about my family. And by him having that opinion and the journeys they take together, that really helps Meg figure out what she should and shouldn't care about. And it's really important to her development and her growth to see Charles Wallace just kind of step out of the house and do things in the way he does in the book and kind of take his adventures and just still not really care what people think of him and say about him. And in the books in the beginning, she's like, yeah, you know, I always admire him, but I don't see how he could do that. And through their adventures and the things they have to do, she kind of gets it, and she kind of is able to kind of get to her end place. And in the movie, we kind of skip all that. She gets to her own place just like through love and the adventures she has and no one else has, which is different approach. It still gets to the same end place, but I think it diminishes what he does and his role in the story.
I personally think they couldn't have picked a better actor for Charles Wallace. Charles Wallace has so much character, both on screen and in the book. It was very important to find somebody who could tackle all of those elements. Find someone who was, you know, not only lovable, but also a little bit asinine in the same sense, you know, and I think he was able to articulate that very well throughout the film. For me personally, in the beginning of the book, I was not a big Charles Wallace fan because I thought he was very disrespectful. But if you've ever had the pleasure of meeting a real life genius, their brains don't operate the same. I mean, they're very socially awkward. And so I think that in the movie, although we miss a lot of the genius elements of what, you know, what makes Charles Wallace who he is, you do get that in his acting ability because, you know, he does put off some of those I guess those loner type traits where he doesn't appear to have a lot of friends. He takes bullying kind of with a grain of salt. And for me, I think that it was very well depicted. I think that he hit on all the right areas. I just, you know, like Reggie said, the only thing I didn't really see was more of a closeness. In the book, there's definitely a closeness, a much stronger closeness or a much stronger bond between Megan and Calvin. But you do get that in the movie in the end, because obviously her quest is filled with love, and the one of the underlying themes of this is love, and it helps you to conquer the things that you don't understand. And so you see that she knows it's very important for her to rescue Calvin and to be his rescuer and know that she's there for him just as much as he's always been there for her. So I think in the end, it all pulled together very well. But I mean, from the get-go, when he's, you know, sitting there on the park bench over listening to the educators talk about him and his family and how he's bullied, I think it was all very well depicted. It just, you know, you have to get the words in a visual aspect. And sometimes it's really hard for a director and a writer to create that imagery.
Absolutely. Did we just, I don't think we tackled it, the concept of the fact that they changed his, I guess the right way to say it is the origin story, you know?
Oh, that he's adopted?
Yeah, I was curious to know what everybody's take on that would be.
I mean, I think it's cool. There's a lot to be said about modernizing a story that's old and making it more accessible to wider audiences, which is what I think they did by diversifying the cast very well. And I think also what they did by not just diversifying the cast in terms of who Charles Wallace is, but his relation to the family. I'm personally, and this may be shooting myself in the foot for the point system, but I personally love that they made these kinds of changes that kind of make the movie more accessible to more people. Not everyone's family is just a mom, a dad, a kid, a sister, a brother. Like, you have so many different family dynamics, and if one person can like relate to an adopted sibling that they love just as much as a regular sibling that they have blood with, and I say regular, that's stupid. Like, having an adopted is totally regular if that's what's normal for your family. I mean, if one person can get something out of that, it's totally worth it, and it's a good decision. I'm fine with it. I don't think it like hurt the story. I don't think it like did much to like make it much better, other than necessarily being like, your love is your love, and it doesn't matter, because they never really talk about it, but she loves him so much, almost in a way that it's like it doesn't matter, you know. But since they don't touch on it, in terms of that, it doesn't make a big difference.
Okay.
Well, I have never publicly spoken about this, so this is kind of a revelation for me, but I actually am adopted. I have a biological mother, but my father is adopted. He adopted me when I was 4 years old. So for me, I very much lived this reality, and I thought it was a beautiful element, not because of my personal situation, but because I think that it helped smooth out some of that awkwardness that you couldn't get through the adaptation of the book into the movie. Again, that visual aspect. I think that it helped his genius persona kind of make a little bit more sense. It's like, well, he's not quite like the rest of them here, he's a little bit different, but maybe it's because he's not really, of their bloodline, and not to dismiss saying that at all, because I mean, family is family. Hanging out with, my dad all these years, I'm more like my dad. I even refer to myself as my father's son. I mean, that's how much I am like my dad, but you take away that awkwardness for children of adoption, it becomes a reality. You understand that family is such a diverse definition now, and there's so many different aspects of what it means to be a member of a family. And so for me, I don't think it took away from the story at all. There was that kind of biting of my tongue at first, like, okay, why is he adopted and not part of it? But I think I was more up in arms about the twins being gone than I was about him being adopted. I think he did it. He was cast in the role perfectly, and that was just another bonus in the whole scheme of things.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and now we are going to wrap up with the characters with 3 of them, because you can't just single them out. So we will be talking about the 3 Misses, and that is Mrs. Whatsit, Mrs. Who, and Oprah. So let's...
And Oprah.
Come on, do not see that coming. Seriously, you should have looked under your seat and you might have found the joke. Yeah, we're going to do this all night, folks. Try the brisket. It's delicious. So let's start with Mrs. Whatsit, and let's discuss how she is in the books, as well as the actress that portrayed her in the film, who is Reese Witherspoon.
All right, so Mrs. Whatsit in the book and in the movie is pretty, like, calm, chill, just like her own person. She's kind of trying to describe her well, and I'm not doing a very good job. She's kind of like light and carefree, and like kind of like, yeah, this is gonna be a good time. In the movie, she has the same air. I think she captures the person. Reese Witherspoon captures the personality of Mrs. Whatsit pretty well, but she takes a beef with Meg that, I mean, it's there in the book, but it's not like this. She's pretty snappy with everyone. She's kind of snarky and sassy behind people's backs. And I don't know, I just don't like those aspects of her in terms of like talking about some young girl behind her back and stuff. But I mean, there's a time and place for it, but they never really correct it. They never really discuss it, So that's where my issue with that comes in. Do you want us to do all 3 or stop in between?
We're going to go in. We're going to stop in between.
Okay, so then the last thing with her is her transformation, which in the movie she turns into basically a cabbage.
Yes, the flying cabbage.
Which is weird. And then in the books, if you haven't read it or you don't know, she kind of turns into a centaur creature and is able to like carry the kids. And she still can fly, but she's not a cabbage.
Yeah, I thought that maybe it was some way to get kids to eat their vegetables. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, Cammy.
If it was, then it's brilliant, but I don't know about that.
Yeah, I will agree with you there. Cammy, run with this.
I'm here to defend the cabbage. I saw nothing wrong with the cabbage, first of all, because, if honestly, if you would have had the visual depiction of what you see in the book, it would have been what you see all the time. We see a Pegasus type creature with wings and rainbows, and that's what you expect from fantasy. The fact that we took it in a completely different direction, and okay, yeah, it was a little awkward, I'm not gonna lie, but I didn't see a cabbage. What I just saw is this flow of life. For me, I saw this derivative, almost like a leaf or a stem extension of a flower. I just saw life in her, and I just saw through that she's sharing that, because in that scene, both in the book and in the movie, it's about oxygen. It's about sharing the idea and the understanding of a different way of breathing. So to me, again, visual depiction, I thought that was very well done. But as a casting director for a movie, you know, going in, when you choose an actor for a specific role, you are choosing them based on their resume. And any Reese Witherspoon movie I have ever seen, when has that snappy little snarky attitude been any different? So to not see that in this movie, she would have been suppressing it. And it was, honestly, it was kind of refreshing because, you know, in the book, you kind of get this visualization of almost like an old lady with this round nose. And with her, it was just like this whole different visual aspect. And I thought that, you know, me personally, I'm going to defend this movie till I'm blue in the face. So I thought that the actual character casting was genius, and I loved her in this role. I don't think there could have been a better cast of Mrs. Period.
Okay, let's talk about Mrs. Who then, and not just the actress that portrays her, who of course is Mindy Kaling, but let's also talk about the modernization of her role, which for me personally, I thought was quite clever.
Yeah, it makes sense to modernize what she's doing. So Miss Who only or typically speaks in quotes of other people, which is a unique concept in itself. In the book, she's speaking from people of history, of people of the past. In the movie, while we have a couple of quotes that directly tie in to those moments, she's mostly talking about modern stuff, modern songs, modern people, modern artists. It's very pop culture centered or very like of now, which makes sense. It's totally a good idea, and I like it and I get it. My issue with this is, sadly for Mindy Kaling, I think her line delivery was just so slow, and it made her feel very awkward when she was delivering these lines, like as if she didn't know what she was saying or why she was saying it. I didn't like, it felt very awkward to me. I didn't like how she delivered the lines, which is sad because I really like Mindy Kaling. And I think she was all of the witches were very beautiful in this movie, but I just felt like she was just kind of like slowing it down, and then no one knew what she was saying. And then it really took me out of the moment and out of the world, because I'm like, why is she talking like that? Instead of just like, here's the quote and here it's just delivered. There's a couple moments where she'd smile, where she said it, where she'd pick up the pace, but for a lot of them, it just felt very awkward. And I felt like she could have made the modernization of these lines feel more modern than they felt by her saying them in the way she did. But the lines themselves were brilliant. And I think that in terms of like a writing standpoint, that was such a smart move.
Do I need to say who my favorite miss is? Do I need to?
Yeah, well, doesn't she not have the glasses in the book? Doesn't that have, aren't those possessed by, oh.
Yes. Well, this is actually a focal point of her character, but I still just love how you can snap them closed just like she does in the movie. So, okay, now that I'm done showing off my glasses again, because I'm so proud of those glasses, let's talk about Mrs. Who.
Yes.
No, Mrs. Who, yes, there was some awkwardness in her presentation, but honestly, I think that was needed. Where I do disagree with Reggie, we disagree a lot here, Reggie, where I do disagree with you.
At the end.
Yes, but I don't know if I'm defending really my own stance here or if I'm giving her points again, because although I understand from a movie perspective, it is important to be relatable to your current day audience. So the pop culture references were definitely understood. I think that in today's society, you see this all too often, even in modern day literature, where we are dumbing down our children. We are not giving the children the credit that they deserve. To say that a child couldn't understand a ancient philosopher, or they don't understand Shakespeare, or the beauty of the book is how Ingle also intertwines multiple languages. I mean, we see Spanish in the book, we see French in the book. And so therefore, to almost say that a child is too, meek or too uncultured, I mean, I don't know how else to put it, that they wouldn't understand the references of yesteryear is really insulting to me as a reader, because I read it as a kid. And no, I may not have necessarily knew who a particular person was that she was quoting. But that's the beauty of reading a book, is you then put the book down and you go, and now in my day it was Encyclopedia Britannica, so you know, let me go ahead and date myself here.
World book for me.
But honestly, now kids, as easy as it is for a child to pick up their cell phone and Google something that they don't understand, why can we not get that in the heads of authors? I am so tired of people, you know, making something so simplistic. It's really frustrating to me. And I saw this, I had done a book haul in 2017, and I had touched on a book, The Tales of the Fourth Grade Nothing. And when, you know, we did books in my generation as a child, when you came to the end of the book, if that author had another book coming out, you'd see a small excerpt in the back of the book with the next book that was coming to pass. And there was a small excerpt of Sheila the Great. And I had bought a modern copy of this book, and I'm reading through and I'm like, oh, I don't even remember Sheila the Great. But there was an area where they were talking about her in the living room dancing, and how she went to go change the CD player. And I immediately got taken aback. I mean, literally, I felt my mind just pop out of the book, and I was so upset. I mean, literally, I just pissed that they felt that they had the right, the publishers had the right to change this word. And in the original text, it's a record player. But to think that a child either couldn't turn around and say, hey, mom or dad, what's a record? Or to Google what a record was, it's flabbergasting to me. So in that element, I would have really liked to have seen this from the director. I would have liked to see just a piece of this continue from the book to the movie. And I really would have liked us to stay with the original context and not had so many pop culture references, because that really takes away from the essence of the other audience that we're not talking about, which is the people that were there in the 60s and 70s and read it for the first time. And, you know, they were hoping to see a different story here. It was almost too modernized on too many levels. And that for me was a negative.
Who's defending what again? I'm confused now. I'm officially
I know, right?
Did we do that backwards? I feel like we did that backwards.
Yeah, we literally swapped bodies here. This is insane. Let's move on to
I still like the movie though.
Let's move on to Mrs. Witch, and specifically, obviously, the almighty and powerful Oprah that everybody loves and adores. Maybe not necessarily me, but let's also talk about the fact that this is now entity/idea versus physical being, which is also another interesting thing that was changed.
Definitely interesting. So in the books, we have Mrs. Witch being this like entity, I guess is the best way to describe it. She doesn't have this like physical form.
Yeah, pretty much like Oprah. She's a state of mind.
Yeah, it makes sense now. I get the casting.
Yes. Yes.
She's just kind of there. What I love about her in the book is that she forgets that humans need like 3 dimensions to live, and food and water, and like they need this and this and that. And she's like, man, these kids are so demanding. And in the movie, she seems like much more caring. Which I mean, it's fine, but she's just different. She's very Oprah in the movie. There's a moment when Meg can't make a jump, and she goes back to her and is like, here, let me talk you through it. In a way that feels very of Mrs. Witch's character, like this very kind, compassionate, and she has these moments. Obviously she cares because she's helping these kids get to where they are, but she's very like disconnected in what they really need and who they really are, and in the like physical things that they have to have. So it just felt very different to me. I do like the casting of Oprah. It's funny because she's like, Mrs. Witch is this like all-seeing, overseeing character, which is very Oprah. But I also feel like they Oprah'd the role and changed kind of her role in the movie and what she was doing for Megan and all of the kids, really.
Mm-hmm.
I think Oprah's casting was genius, and let me tell you why. Because one of the elements that this movie is missing is the underlying basis of how the story was written, and that's from a Christian perspective. You're not going to see that in modern movies. You're just, it's not talked about. Religion is one of those things that's almost taboo. You don't know how to approach it. So the idea and the concept has always been, well, don't tackle it. I mean, that's the first thing people tell you. Don't talk about religion, don't talk about politics, and everything is cherry. But having Oprah cast as Mrs. Witch did exactly what I needed to see from the theological perspective. Because when we think of Oprah, I think we all think of the motherly aspect. I mean, she just embodies that from all of the different projects she's worked on over the years. She's just kind, she's compassionate, she's giving, she's caring. These are all normal Oprah qualities. So for her to be, you know, this form, because now we see her as a form, not as an entity or as a being, and it would have worked okay too, even if she was just a voice. I mean, everybody can recognize Oprah's voice. She has one of those recognizable ones, you know, just like James Earl Jones, although that would have been an interesting take. But okay, sorry, that's just the inner Disney Star Wars in me.
Yeah, we'll talk about genders.
Let's gender swap there for a moment.
No, but
in all seriousness, in all seriousness, no, she encapsulated exactly what we needed to see in Miss Witch, because she is trying to give Meg that boost. She's trying to encourage her to find her inner courage. And in the book, she does the same, but for me, it humanized it in the movie. And you needed to feel that, because Meg needed that push. She needed to figure out the whole purpose of the journey, and that's finding herself and finding the courage within herself, because by finding that courage and finding that inner strength, it's going to take her to the next level. It's going to help her with the next battle. It's going to help her, you know, destroy the next boss. And Oprah's there every step of the way, you know, with that scene that you were referencing, when she turns around and they're on that bridge and she's trying to just give her that face to face. What young girl hasn't wanted Oprah to just squeeze her cheeks and say, it's going to be okay, darling, you know? I mean, come on. Oprah has personally been through so many trials and tribulations. She virtually came from poverty, from nothing. And so to see her in this role and almost kind of, I don't know, to me, when I saw her looking at Meg, I almost kind of saw her looking at a younger version of herself, just encouraging her every step of the way, saying, you know what, you've got this, kid, you've got this. And in the end, you're going to love how things turn out. Just believe in yourself. And I can totally see, you know, Oprah writing a letter to herself, you know, her younger self, and being that, you know, Meg. I can see her telling herself these little encouraging notes throughout life just to get her to the next level in her career.
Wow. That's fantastic. A really, really nice perspective there. And with that, everybody, we officially finish up round 2. And that was amazing. Absolutely amazing. I am surprised that we don't have a bigger crowd watching today, minus the troll that has 50 bazillion different names and saying very perverted things in the chat. But
we're
anyway,
getting some weird comments.
Yeah, and they're definitely from someone that I don't know. That's all that I'm going to say.
Yeah.
But anyway, with a score of 4-2, the films tie it up.
Did I win? Did I win?
Yes, you won. You won, but I'm not Oprah. But I'm not Oprah, so you don't get a car. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, we're going to continue with the Oprah jokes throughout the rest of the show, everybody. Anyway, looks like we don't really have any questions, and honestly, I'm okay with that, because it is now 7:18 and we still have so much ground to cover. So it looks like we may in fact go over the 2-hour mark, but you know something? We're having too much fun, so I will welcome that. But I did send another message out on Twitter for everybody to come join us, just in case they're not watching. So now the real discussion is going to heat up, because we're going to be talking about the plot points and the changes. So get ready, everybody. We're going to start off with the elephant in the room first. It's going to be 3-pronged. We're going to be talking about the diversity, the representation of women, and the gender swap of the happy medium. Based on 3 things that are focused on a lot socially, whether it's in the country that we are currently living in, the United States, or all around the world, it is definitely something that is important to discuss. But the more important question is, did they add or take away something from the film? especially based on a loyal fan base. Because we have to remember the fact that there are 60 and 70-year-olds that have read this book, and they come and see a movie that is completely on its head and not what they remember to a certain degree. So I'm curious to know what both of your thoughts will be on these three specific issues. Let's not go too deep into this because we're not going to turn this into a political discussion, but I would very much like to know your general consensus and ideas. So let's start with the books.
All right. And this is where I'm doing that thing where I shoot myself in the foot, but only 2 out of the 3 points will do this. So the diversity, I think, is fantastic. I mentioned it throughout this live show at various points, but I think it's such a great window to opening this book and this movie up to audiences that may not have experienced it before, or may not have been interested in it before, and making it feel more like this could happen to anyone, or this is everyone's story, or any of that fun stuff that representation and diversity presents. I also think the women were depicted well. I like the focus on Meg and her insecurities. I like all of the witches, which is something that I like in the book as well. I think the women are focused on very well. I think that the gender swap is weird of the happy medium, and not because it takes away from another woman in the role or anything like that. What I find it weird is that it felt like it was a move to bring in a romance with one of the witches, which was weird and didn't do anything for anyone, or it was just there to have another like big name in the movie, and which is unnecessary and useless because you could have used anyone for that. I didn't get the point. I don't think it made any sense.
Well, for me, diversity, like I said, it doesn't make a difference to me who plays the role as long as they understand the character. So for me, right off the bat, I had no issue with that. I just wanted to make sure that these actors were true to the understanding of what they were representing. Because when you have a book like this, as timeless as it is, and it goes back generations, you have an obligation to your audience on that scale from both perspectives, your modern audience and your audience that's been tried and true since the beginning. So knowing and seeing that and seeing how well the cast direction went, I was fine. You know, I had no issue with any kind of diversity on that level. As far as the representation of women, it was very important that we saw Meg's insecurities from the beginning, and the way it tied up in the end, I could not be more happy, because again, coming from a current societal perspective, you have a lot of young women who have a ton of insecurities that are built up because of the technological age that we live in. And so to see someone as strong and strong-willed as Meg is, and then to see her still have her own insecurities and her own battles within her mind, but yet knowing how important her role is in the overall development of the finality of this story, in, you know, getting to her father, bringing her father home, and, you know, tying in, she was really the glue that held all the characters together. Again, they could not have cast a better young woman. I could not speak more highly of Storm Reid. I thought she did a phenomenal job of showing both sides of the spectrum. So, you know, also representation of women was the misses. I mean, again, the casting as far as who they chose to portray the misses, I think they hit exactly the type of character traits I would have envisioned. I know there's some, you know, there's some differences as far as presentation or the way that it came across, but again, that's the specific actor bringing those to light. So when you're casting a certain actor, you're also inviting those types of character traits in that individual and knowing that those are going to pop up in the film. As far as the gender swap for the happy medium, frankly, I could, you know, give 2 figs whether it was male or female. It made no difference to me. I just thought Zach Galifianakis was a very odd choice because he was trying to be funny, but we didn't need funny, because happy medium in the book is not funny. She's, you know, she's cheery. She's trying to, kind of be the voice of reason, you know, the happy medium. I mean, she is what she's intended to. She's trying to bring to light all of the darkness and the tragedy and all of this stuff that the children need to be very receptive to and understand, but in the same regard, kind of give them the hope of the future and bring that as a visualization. For me, I was missing the crystal ball aspect, but maybe they just didn't want to be 80s cheesy and bring a crystal ball in the mix. I didn't get the whole rock counterbalancing thing. You know, that to me was just, I was more like on the edge of my seat. Are they going to fall? Are they not going to fall? What's going on here? You know? And I agree with you completely, Reggie, on the awkward relationship between Reese's character and Zach. It wasn't necessary. Again, if that was for the purpose of a sequel, the sequel's kind of been shot, but that was just odd and creepy to watch, because that's not what we envisioned the happy medium to be. So it wasn't so much the fact that it was played by a man, it was just the fact that I don't feel he nailed that character at all.
Okay, a curveball is now coming your way, both of you. One of the few things that a lot of people were very dissatisfied with was the fact that in regards to the film, a lot of the important aspects of the book were taken away. And a lot of people have said that one of the things that they did not like in regards to the diversity was that was apparently the driving force of the film adaptation. Now, I am also completely okay with the fact that it was a diverse cast. I had no issue with it as long as the characters are played well. But to a certain degree, it seemed to me like there was a lot to be left for satisfaction in regards to people who are fans of the books as a whole. A lot was missing. And one of the things that was missing was a lot of Meg's intelligence in regards to explaining the whole thing with the Tesseract, because we mentioned the ant. The ant wasn't even there. So we want to see strong female characters. I mean, honestly, it's not a new concept. I mean, we had Princess Leia in the 1970s. Hello. We've had strong female characters for a very long time in film. But is that something that was okay to take away? Because as someone who appreciates a strong female character along with a strong male character, that is something that demeans the character if you don't truly show how smart she is.
Right, and there's this this idea to an extent that a strong female character is just strong in one way. You think, especially in modern movies and books, you think of Katniss, you think of Triss, you think of these girls who like can do all these active things and can be really strong and survive, and you don't think of necessarily strong being like in being able to endure hardships or being smart or being this or being that, or all these things that Meg is. And you'd hope that with a book that has these things in place for her, the movie would not strip those away. And it didn't necessarily, it didn't necessarily say, no, she's not smart. No, she hasn't gone through things, but it focused on her insecurities and not her other traits and not the things that she has going for her. And that's not necessarily a good thing at all, no.
Me personally, I think that was exactly what we needed out of Meg, though, because the whole focal point I felt from the directing perspective was to focus on her insecurities, to bring that inner courage to light. I think there was a lot of drive, a lot of conversation about her finding her inner strength and knowing her worth and knowing her importance. So I don't think it was so much intended to depict her intelligence. I don't think at any point during the film do you see that she's, I guess, looked at as not being of the intellectual type or not portraying that. I mean, there's not a lot of platform for her to showcase her intelligence just because of the rapid movement of the movie and the dialogue. I think the focal point on the intelligence was very much shifted towards Charles Wallace. But I've even said with him, I don't feel like we encapsulated the full, complex diversity of his mind. Where I was really disappointed on the aspect of women's intelligence was when it came to that of Meg's mom. I mean, you hardly saw the woman at all in the film. It really was, it was disappointing to me because equally in the book, they're both scientists. They came to this tessering idea together. this was a family dynamic. This was, you know, something that they had discussed, had written, I'm sure there was a thousand different, you know, scientific prototypes and theories and mathematical equations that went into this. And yet this woman has what, maybe 2-3 cameos in the whole film, and you hear her utter maybe 2 or 3 lines. To me, that was more of an insult.
Her husband and not about anything else.
They're completely about her husband and where her husband is at, and it's almost like she was developed to be this meek character that couldn't survive, when she is in fact a very strong character in the book. She is extremely intelligent. I mean, you are a derivative of your environment. How do you not see that Meg would have gained all of that strength and intelligence from her mother? You know, yes, we see the connection that she has with her father, and it's even showcased at the beginning of the film, but we don't see the development of the relationship between Meg and her mom at any time. I mean, Kate Murray is almost like a non-existent character. If she didn't pop up a couple of times around the plants, you wouldn't even think she was an existing, you know, force in this movie.
Right.
So that, to me, that was more damaging than anything, because the overall scientific perspective was removed from this movie, and that is such an important part of this entire book. Now, on the whole concept of teaching an ant to walk on a rope, I mean, they had a hard enough time teaching squirrels to bang nuts for Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. So you want them to teach an ant to do tightrope?
That's funny.
Isn't that Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, not Willy Wonka? Oh, there were geese in Willy Wonka.
No. For the 2005 Tim Burton adaptation, they taught nuts to bang bad nuts, or squirrels to bang bad nuts. Not for Willy Wonka. Willy Wonka was the bad egg in that scene.
Yes, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. No, but you said Willy Wonka when in fact you meant Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I think.
Oh, did I? Okay,
yeah,
sorry. Okay,
yeah.
but no, I meant Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Those movies. I don't want you to feel embarrassed by that. So I just want to make sure that we were on the right page there. Anyway,
absolutely. No, but
let's move on to the other important factor here, which is the target audience.
Yes.
Some people labeled this movie the most expensive Disney Channel movie ever made. And Ava DuVernay herself even said that her target audience was children in the ages of 7 to, let's say, 14, I believe it was. Now, is that something that is right or wrong? Because we have to remember, this is a book that has been around for almost maybe even already half a century. Yeah, already half a century.
62, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, how does a fan base that has been around for so many years, especially even though we're getting new fans by the days now that this movie is out, more kids, I'm sure, are reading this book. But is it wrong to cast a massive fan base to the side and just gear a film based on a beloved book to just a specific fan base?
I think that's something that Hollywood has either one perspective of or another. They either really care about the fans' opinions or they really don't. And I feel like this movie took it as like, we know you're there and cool if you see it, but we really don't care. We want this to be for our kids of our time, and that's why we're doing a lot of the choices we're doing. And there is merit to that. And there is so much to be said about the little girls who got to see themselves in Meg and all of that good stuff, but that could still be portrayed, and you could still get so much of the good that came out of that without kind of dismissing 56 years of an audience. You have people who have cared about this, and to not just like that things were changed, that's very little to do with how good a movie is, but to just like not even care in the process, be like, no, this is for the kids, and only the kids, it is the flaw. Like, to say this is for the kids and for the fans is fine. Like, to include the kids in there makes sense. But to make it only about the kids feels like a big disservice to the reason you're even able to make this into a movie. To the author who wrote it, to the fans who kept it alive. It's stayed a classic and a book that's been beloved for a long time because of the people who read it and the people who passed it on. And to just kind of discount them is a little rude, I think. But like, I get it. I get including the kids, and I get making them a big focus. But for Ava to actually say like, no, this isn't for anyone else is kind of like weird, especially because you think about like a lot of Disney movies that like they know the parents are going to be there, and they make so many jokes that kids aren't going to get, but are not like PG.
Yeah.
But they do it under the eyebrow, like no one's going to know. And so even they understand when making those movies that parents are going to be there and other people are going to be there and other people are going to be interested. And it just feels weird to me that that was just so discounted here.
Okay, one thing that we have to do, and again, this kind of goes on the lines of when you go in with such strong expectations about converting a book to a movie. This book was written for young adults. Well, it's that gray area of middle grade, 11 to 15-year-olds. If a movie and a director that's creating the movie has the imagery that she is targeting 7 to 14-year-olds, her mark is not off. Where you have to respect your audience in a case like this, and that's why it's so crucial when you're recreating a classic, is that you add little tidbits of the original story, that you bring some elements of the classic movie. For me, like I said, the only scene that did that was the rubber ball scene. That was, for me, it took me back to the 60s because of the outfits that the mothers were wearing, the way that they were just very clean, neat kept, their hair was up, the almost cookie cutter image of the neighborhood and so forth. So I think for the visual aspect, that was definitely a failure for the movie because we were missing the secondary audience. But if the primary focus was still that of the way it was written, then she really did nail it because it was written for children. And I think that as adults, we can't expect to go in with these high expectations that this movie that is initially a book written for children is going to be tailored to me as an adult. I think for me, I would give much more appreciation to a director and to a writing staff that can actually do the reverse and take me from the adult embodiment that I am now and make me a child again. Can you pull me back? Do you have the skills that it takes to bring me back to the first time I read this book? Can you actually do me justice and bringing a visual aspect to this book that I love so much? So if they can have the reverse effect on me to a classic tale, then I give them the seal of approval. And to be honest, again, I don't think that she missed the mark on that. I think she missed some opportunities to bring in some more classic elements, but I don't think she failed. I think overall, I give her an A- as far as doing that.
Okay, so that's very strong sentiments there. Okay. We're going to do a little bit of a rapid fire right now, and depending on what your answers will be, take as long as you want. But I'm going to basically talk now about things that were removed and things that were added, which I think is something that we were excited to talk about. So I'm just going to throw out the names, and whoever wants to jump in first, jump in first. I think Cammie's going to want to jump into this one first, though. The twins.
I immediately tweeted you a message about that when you were talking about wanting to do this, and I was pissed. I hate when characters are omitted. I really do. And yes, the twins do not have that big of a role in the book, but even with the fact that their roles are so minuscule, it gives you an understanding of the type of character that Meg is. I mean, it gives you that full spectrum of the relationship she has in the family dynamic and the protector of her siblings, and where she just gets that inner drive and that inner strength to be the strong arm, if you will. And you're missing that. And then, the further the cutoff with the change of Charles Wallace and how we view him, I mean, he just kind of comes into the family in a different way. I can't say that the movie necessarily had any missing puzzle pieces because the twins weren't present, but it definitely left a gaping hole for the potential of a sequel because the twins play a much larger role later on, and so you would basically have to creatively write them in as well. So the fact that they're missing altogether, no matter how small the role may have been, I think that it needed to be there. They were in the 2003 version, and that was Disney, so why omit them now? But I think that was a decision based on, where Ava DuVernay was heading with this film.
Yeah, I agree almost wholeheartedly. They don't play a huge role in this book, and so it's really easy to cast them aside and be like, they're not necessary. I don't know if there was just not really much of a care to continue, or if they knew they weren't going to be able to, or if they just assumed they would cross that bridge when they came to it. But by not including them, they do a disservice to the franchise and what they could have done with it. And additionally, with that, you do miss a lot of Meg and her family dynamic and Charles Wallace and all of their just relationships with each other. It's not to say that they felt like an incomplete family in the movie or anything, but if you know what they feel like in the books, you kind of feel like there is that missing piece.
The addition of Meg's bully, played by Rowan Blanchard.
That's definitely playing into modern society because bullies are everywhere and people try very hard to get their own stance and their own platform on this. I mean, you see it all over social media, anti-bully campaigns, dealing with bullying in school. A lot of the thought process behind today's gun violence in schools is always laced back to bullying and, you know, how we treat people. So to not have included that, I think would have been a disservice for the overall message that we get in the end and how we finalize the film, because I think that was an important element of Meg's strength and her drive and determination to get her through to the end.
I get the point of the bullying, and I totally agree that why it's there is the modern spin. I just felt like there was this unnecessary girl on girl hate that I hate seeing in any kind of media, because it's this girl hating on this other girl, and it's this like very idealized tropey, like wealthy white snobby girl who's just like bullying, and it just felt super tropey to me and unnecessary, and I'm never okay with girl on girl hate. I get the point of showing the bullying. I don't think they ever really tackled like, and they touch on it, but I don't feel like they ever tackled like a discussion about bullying. Is more like how it affected Meg. So it just feels like they could have done a lot more if they really wanted to do something with it, and they didn't. So yeah.
From a driving character force to an honorable mention, Aunt Beast.
She's just like not there. She's such a like kind, helpful soul. She's not there. I feel like they think they had it with like everyone else they had put in. I felt like they felt like it was enough.
For me, that's kind of how the ending. That's how I felt. I mean, yes, for me, loving the book as much as I do, and how important her role is in the literature version of it. I think that for the movie, it would have been too much. There was too much going on as it was. There was too many character dynamics, and you have to make those decisions, those critical decisions when making a movie. I know that kind of contradicts what I just said about omitting characters, but you know, sometimes there are certain characters that they don't really make or break the story visually. If you know, you're reading it, absolutely having them there is important, but visually some characters just don't need to be there. They can just be discussed or talked about. Now, for going back to, you know, appealing to the older audience, the ones that had been there from the beginning, I think that we missed her more than the modern day, because with kids, I mean, let's face it, there's going to be a handful of kids that are going to go out and read this book for the first time, and it's going to draw them in. But kids are more technologically based now. Not a lot of kids are reading at the rate that they used to in the 60s and 70s and my generation in the 80s. So with that said, your child is just going to see it as, oh, okay, she's talked about. The curious child, the actual bookworm, is going to go out and be like, hey, this was missing from the story. And, you know, then that'll give them dialogue and fuel for their fire. And eventually maybe they'll start a booktube channel.
Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? Okay, the red rubber balls and the complete elimination of the Central Intelligence.
I like the red rubber ball scene. Visually, it's my favorite in the movie. Perhaps visually, I think one of the coolest moments in the movie. It's synchronized. It's smart. It makes sense. It's a huge homage to the book and what the book represents. I think it was well done. I think it was, again, one of those instances, though, for me, where the movie is speeding through things, and in doing so, that's also part of passing through the central intelligence. You just miss a lot of unearthing this world and what's really going on this planet. It's more like we're just walking towards this evil thing, not actually what's happening here and why it's evil or how it's evil.
Visually, for me, I agree that scene was probably one of my favorites in the movie, at least top 5 favorite scenes, just because it gave a creepy feel to it and it took us back to the 1960s for a moment. But what I did not appreciate is the fact that they took out the information that so precedes that, which is the punishment, that the child is then dragged off, and there's a punishment element to that. And I think it's very important from a current societal perspective to start incorporating morals and values back into our movies, because we are so afraid, going again back to political correctness, to bring back the themes, the motifs from these childhood books. And these books are laced with morals and values and lessons and principles to make you a well-rounded, good human being. And the fact that we're not seeing the consequences of actions or the other side of that. One of the reasons this book was actually taken to publication 26 times before it was actually published. Mm-hmm. So in those 26 representations, every single time Madeleine L'Engle was told the book is too evil. Kids aren't going to understand that. So here we have, on a visual front, this darkness, this force of evil. If we're not going to talk about the Christian elements of it, the least we can do is show that there's a consequence for actions, that there's a variety of the balance of the good and the evil, because just by giving you a one-sided nature doesn't give kids the overall lesson. And so we have to think of it in the terms that if the child isn't going to leave this theater and go out and read the book, then the least we can do is teach the lessons and the morals and the values on screen. I felt that was what that scene was missing for me. And then, the overall CCI was completely gone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's also now talk about the first encounter of the man with the red eyes. Very different in the
Yeah, because the encounter with the man in the red eyes is kind of correlated to the CCI, and if you take that out, you kind of have to figure out where to throw them in. The encounter specifically, they kind of just happen upon him, it feels like, in the movie, instead of in the books. They're seeking this out, they're trying to save their dad, they're trying to figure out what's happening here, and it goes back to them passing through a lot of this quickly and not really getting to the root of the bad things that are happening on Kamzat. So it just almost feels like things are happening to them instead of these kids are on this journey and with a purpose and trying to figure things out. I think it does a discredit to the kids and the characters to kind of take out how evil this planet is in this places, instead of just there's this it thing. It's dark and scary. It feels like they're just like, yo, that thing's scary, instead of kind of getting to the root of how and why and what is evil about this place. And the meeting with him, I mean, to me, the root of it is there's a lot of similarities. There's the food. There's the trickery that's happening. But it's the way it's brought about is what's different and what kind of does a disservice to the kids. Also, I think the Charles Wallace aspect, I don't know if I just interpreted it wrong, but to me it felt very different. He goes into this and he kind of is like, you know what, I got to take care of this for you. He kind of takes this moment of this is the only way we're gonna be able to win the day. He has this selfless moment, whereas in the movie he turns back and is like, yo, I got this for a millisecond. But it almost feels more to me like he's just almost tricked into what happens to him instead of making a decision. And again, I think that does a disservice to Charles Wallace's character and his intelligence and just who he is.
I'm striking back for the movie because I disagree. And this is why, because I think that scene actually was done brilliantly. It was done very well. Michael Pena, who portrayed Red in the film, automatically you get a sense of deadening from him. He seemed very robotic. He seemed, you know, very out of character. If you've ever seen him in any other character, he seemed almost lifeless. So I got a robotic
way too many good characters. He is a great actor. I really do like him.
He's a phenomenal actor. I love him. And that's what I enjoyed about this depiction. And again, it's about that method actor getting inside the character. So being that the CCI and the whole backstory of we're not getting all that. You have to have certain areas of the film that say a lot in a very short period of time. And it's from that scene where Charles Wallace initially makes the eye contact, and then he gets the red eyes, and you see him kind of encapsulate that evil. That is exactly what the book does. Because if you follow Charles Wallace's character, Charles Wallace has a tendency to kind of take his genius, and he almost abuses it at times in the literature version. It's like he knows he's smart. He knows he's kind of playing coy with the general public by not, you know, conversing and just kind of sitting back and letting everything happen. But there's times where it gets him into trouble because he takes on too much. And it's in that moment that he does. He does that in the literature version too. He has to take this on for Meg because there has to be a reason Meg goes to rescue him. She needs a reason to rescue him. So this was the perfect opportunity for Charles Wallace to once again use his intelligence and be all cocky, like, I'm the genius that I am, and I got this, let me handle it, full well knowing what we're about to embark on. And then they take them to this creepy little scene. It's almost it is almost kind of Wonka-esque in a sense. You know, it's this white room with this computer board, and you have this creepy guy with red eyes, and you're in an absolute nothingness. You're in a void. And visually, I think that was spot on, because now you see, it's almost like the kids are on their own right there. The misses are completely out of the picture. They have no way of getting to them. This is now between them and that force. And that is the first time you finally see that battle of good and evil. Can these kids prevail? Can they get out of this situation? And are they smart enough? And do they have enough faith and confidence, which is, again, an underlying theme that we don't hear, but is the theme of this book, is faith. Do we have enough faith in the mission? Do we have enough faith in ourselves and a drive to get where we need to be? Can we get from here to get to Dad?
Okay, and now we're going to talk about the portrayal of the It and the final showdown with Charles Wallace.
My favorite.
You go first then.
Yeah, sounds good.
Well, for me, the showdown of the It was everything. When we talk about the underlying theme and how we're watching Meg develop and we're seeing her build her confidence and all these trials and tribulations, it comes down to that moment. It's just her and the void. It's the It. It's the darkness. It's all encapsulated in that one moment. And when I saw that depiction, that room, if you will, the blackness with the bolts of lightning going around, I immediately took myself as to being inside her head. To me, I was seeing neurons, and I was seeing nerve endings in the brain. When your brain thinks and, you know, you have a thought, your brain turns on like a little light over here or over here, wherever, whatever compartment is thinking at that time. And so for me, visually, that was a very one of the few scientific moments in the movie, because I thought, okay, we're inside Meg's head now. How is she going to battle this darkness? However, from I guess a battle of good versus evil portion of it, those little specks of light were also serving as the light in the darkness. So there was a lot visually going on inside that moment in that head. And then you had her arguing with herself, her having, to me, I saw it as when you have that visual of the good person that you are, and then the bad version of you sitting on the shoulders, but they had it projected into a 3D image. You know, she had that self of her walking around knowing, this is what you could look like. This is what I'm offering you. Is this version of you what you want, or do you want to save Charles? You know, she had that moment where she could have been selfish, went on, and really it made sense in this movie because he's not blood. He was an adopted brother. And I know that sounds harsh to say that, but at that moment, she could have chosen the other version of herself. It would have been like Charles Wallace never existed, and she would have went on living life, and everything would have been just as her brain had wanted it to be. But that part of the movie was so important for kids to see, because it's at that moment that you're making all of those decisions in your own head and having that battle of good and evil. And to me, visually, I was floored. I was just wow, wow, wow. I came out of the theater smiling and raving because of that scene right there.
So for me, this scene was super, and this is where we're going to differ hugely. The scene was super underwhelming for me, and I found it just like repetitive and anticlimactic. You get to this room and you see Meg, and you, in this very like way you'd expect, you see her visually fighting her demons that she's been facing, and it's the only demon they've given her in the entire movie, and she conquers it. And then it's like just a big screaming match of her screaming at Charles until he like gets it. And I appreciate the actor who played Charles Wallace a lot, and I think he did great. But in this, I just couldn't believe him. I couldn't buy it. He was so good. I'm not saying he wasn't, and he gave it his all, but it just like it took me out of it. And this is like especially, it happened a lot in this movie where I didn't connect with a lot of things that were happening, or the way things were going down. I couldn't see myself in these situations. But this was the biggest time it happened where I was just like, it felt too big of a disconnect for me. I didn't buy the portrayal of it taking over him. It just felt very cheesy and over the top and not believable to me personally. I think
that's where the intersection is missed, though. If you think about it, again, not talking about faith in this movie and just kind of whitewashing over the Christian undertones of this entire book, that I think visually is lost on a lot of people for that reason. When she's there and she's yelling at Charles Wallace and she's telling him, I love you, that is exactly what you need to see, because cannot go on without faith and love. And it stands to reason that faith and love are without science and reason. I mean, it's two things that, well, really four things if you take them out of their context there, but you can't have science and reason if you don't have faith and love. And that's exactly what she's yelling at him for, to bring him out of the darkness, to bring him back into the light, and to say, I love you, and love is stronger than all of this around you. And that's really playing on his psyche, because that's what got him into that mess in the first place, because he thought he was so intelligent and so strong, and the darkness ended up getting to him and sucking him in. And you get that from the misses in the book, where they tell you, just don't fall privy to conformity and to hatred. Stay away from it, because your mind is so fragile, you're going to be the first one they attack. So visually in the movie, that's exactly what that depicts. They got to him. He fell into conformity. He fell into the hatred. And now love is the only thing that's going to bring him out. And her continual faith in the mission is what's going to drive him home.
But I think without that explanation, it's not as clear, and it's lacking of the substance that they're trying to portray. It's just her screaming at him, and it's very repetitive. It's not like 1 second. It just feels like it's happening forever. And I don't think that's necessary.
Why we need to rally around kids reading the book, because if kids aren't reading the book, then they're not going to get, and it's a sad truth of it all. I mean, it's the society that we live in. We look to movies to read for us, and that's so sad that kids just aren't opening a book. If kids would open the book, they would have known that. They would have understood that the underlying theme of this book really is the conformity and the meshing of love and science, because you can't have one without the other. You can't have, reason without faith. It just doesn't make any sense. And I think that's the overall battle that Stephen Hawking had for years and years. How do you overcome understanding the reason of faith if you are a man of science? It's a never-ending argument, but people don't want to argue.
I agree, and I totally get it, and I see it's there, and I see them hinting at it and them playing with it in the movie. But for people who said this movie was for kids, I don't think they laid that out clearly enough or tackled the things the way they wanted to. They're just like hoping like love is the answer, and they're not really getting down to the themes and the things we're really hoping people take away with this. Or at least the things that it sounds like to me that you're hoping people taking away from this. I don't think the kids necessarily will take that. I think they'll get a lot about love, and they'll get a lot about their insecurities and finding your own self-worth, but I don't necessarily think they'll get a lot about these thought processes that you're hoping they will from the movie.
No, they won't, because sadly they're not there. Unfortunately, the religious aspect of this book was completely omitted, and unless you are a avid reader and you've read the book, you're not going to get those themes. They're just not there.
Mm-hmm. And in one of the last quotes, Oprah's character is listing off all of these warriors. And in the book, one of the warriors that they mention is Jesus, and he's not mentioned in the movie.
Yes.
And it's like, it's
great point.
One of those so subtle things that not only for the movie and the purpose they could have done, but like even to not touch on religion, I feel like they could have still included him without anyone really seeing it as a big issue. That's just my personal opinion. Maybe someone would have seen it as a big issue, but like if they were going to take, I mean, they would have, but if they're going to take out so much of what they were doing with that in the book, I feel like that would have been an easy way to just like tie a few things in.
Well, I think it would have also appeased the older audience too, you know,
exactly.
Those that have been there since the inception of the book, because then they would have been like, okay, we can understand why they didn't touch it. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Mm-hmm. I agree completely, because it's such a one-liner. Charles Wallace says, you know, when they're going through all of these heroes and all of these artists, if you will, that was the conversation. The first thing he says is Jesus. I mean, how simple would that have been to say? But the fear of political correctness is so dark and dismal in Hollywood. It's sad. It's truly sad.
Okay, and now we will go into the last topic, and that, of course, is the overall message.
I think we'll both agree on this, that the overall message, we kind of tackled this very recently. The overall message the kids are going to get, or the audience is going to get, or whoever you're watching this is going to get from the movie, is a lot about love and family and insecurities and your own self-worth. And that's part of, but not all of, what you're going to get from the book. So I don't think they necessarily changed some of the messages they wanted you to get out of the movie. I think they just missed quite a few things that you can get out of the entire story. And I personally feel like it wouldn't have been hard to add some of those things in to make the story a little more fleshed out and to get a little more out of it. And maybe they're thinking that younger audience can only pick up a few things from this. I don't know. Maybe that's me just assuming that of Hollywood, because I know that the kids could pick up all the things they picked up in the book. There's tackles of religion and kindness and science, and there's moments of friendship, which, while there's this like thing between Calvin and Meg, in this book, it feels like a great friendship, which is the start of their romance. In the movie, it just feels like a romance, and there's no tackle of friendship. There's the opposite of that. There's the bullying, but there's no like friendship. I feel like it's just very limiting what you get from the movie just in comparison to the book. Not to diminish what you do get out of the movie, because it's important, it's there. I just think you get a lot more from the book.
I think that can be said, and I agree with all points that Reggie just made. Any book to movie adaptation, though, because you're going to fall short when it comes to the themes and the motifs. You just can't visually bring them all to life. So I think for me, the underlying theme is, you know, it's going to be cliche, but it's the darkness and the light. You know, the only thing faster than light is darkness, and Miss Witch says that in there. And it's the constant reminder that no matter where you're at, no matter what battle you face, no matter what lies ahead, just know darkness is always on your tail. So you just have to be cunning and clever and use your intelligence and your strength and your wit and know your abilities and believe in those abilities. And that will help you persevere to break through the darkness and bring you back to the light.
Oh, wow. We are done, everybody. We actually went into overtime, which is
But not by too much.
incredible. Not by too much, but still overtime either way. But wow, that was a great round, everybody. A great round. And by a score of 6-3, the books take it.
Oh,
I'm
I
surprised.
know.
And this is not my personal bias. Because, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to see my attitude about this film, there will be a link to my review of the film. But valid points were made all across the board. I think that we had a little bit of a challenge trying to stay within our own defenses because I did actually
We
welcome
both
the
did
fact,
it though.
yeah,
We
yeah.
both did it.
Yeah, but you know something, I think that that's what added more to the conversation.
I think it makes
really
it
did
fun.
like that. I
Because like we
agree.
talked about in the beginning how we have a booktuber against like a film a guru or whatever you want to call Cami.
I don't know what I am. I know Steve gave me this label because I'm a
He's like he said
booktuber,
something
but
and I was like, I don't remember what it is.
She's pretty much like me, a pop culture junkie loudmouth. That's what we are.
There you
Okay.
go. There you go.
That's a
See,
long
I didn't
title.
see myself that way until you told me that, and I kind of take that as a compliment because that means I am
the biggest of compliments as possible because I do every day.
No, and I love that though, because it means that what I am trying to do through my YouTube channel is coming through. And I do try to make reference to movies and to other versions of things and not just stick to the book. Because I think it's very important in the society that we live in to pay respects to all the facets that books are derived from. You know, books are a beautiful thing and I never want them to disappear. But I think it's important to give those elements where they're you know, the credit where credit is due.
I agree 100%. And I do agree with the fact that we did touch a lot on the society aspects. And I feel that that's very important because to have a community here in YouTube that actually focuses on books, it's very important. I mean, look, as a young kid, I didn't enjoy reading. And it took me till my college years to truly find my niche. But one of the few things that I'm so happy about to have a community like BookTube is the fact that I am reading well into my 30s now, like never before. I'm reading so much. It is incredible. And knowing that there is a place where I can discover more books, because if it wasn't for BookTube, I would have never heard of the Lunar Chronicles. I would have never read the Wolf by Wolf duology. And at this point in time, I am practically taken under the spell of Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn trilogy. I am adoring these books. And I want to read so much more now. So I'm glad that we have the ability to see these two mediums collide.
For sure.
Because at the same time, as fun as it is to go to the movies, it is always important to know about the humble beginnings of entertainment. And that's why I also feel that one of the few things that I am happy about with my own channel is that once a month I review a classic film. Because the younger generations need to know that there were movies before 1980, and they were very good movies. And it is amazing how some of these films have really pushed the bar in terms of how people viewed the world. Very similar to what books do. But ladies and gentlemen, that is all the time that we have for today. Reggie and Cami, I want to thank you both so much for coming on the show. I want to hope and pray that my future episodes of Versus turn into what we saw today, because I am not lying. This is the best episode I've had so far, because you two really turned it into a debate. I loved that you both interrupted each other. You really wanted to plead your case. I haven't really gotten that much in my episodes of Versus. Not to say that everybody who has already been here before you was bad. Everybody was wonderful. But I just really appreciated the intensity and, more importantly, the flow of the conversation. So everybody, please check out Reggie and Cami's channels. There will be links to their channels as well as their Twitter feeds, so you can follow them on Twitter. I highly recommend that you check out their channels. I've been following Reggie for almost 3 years now. Cami, I just recently got introduced to, and I'm so glad because this was such a fantastic episode, and you both really have important things to say, and everybody's opinion should still be heard because every opinion is relevant. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. I am welcoming all of your comments in the box below, and I'm really excited to bring you guys another great episode of Versus in the near future. So for that, I wish everybody a good night and a wonderful weekend. Take care, everybody. Hey, thank you so much for stopping by my channel today. If you're new here and want to see more of what my channel has to offer, please click on the link to my last video, or hit that subscribe button to be kept up to date with all of my uploads. Content of all sorts is posted here quite often, so trust me, you do not want to fall behind. I will see you in the comments, and actions speak louder than words.